thing Aurora noticed when Everlight came back into view was that it no longer looked temporary. That should have been comforting. It was. Mostly. The shuttle descended through soft gold cloud cover, and the valley opened beneath them like a living map. Roads now curved through the green plains in clean silver lines. The first residential districts had spread beyond the original ridge. Small bridges crossed the river channels. The reservoir shimmered in the afternoon light, half-finished but already beautiful. Construction drones moved between towers, gardens, and new public halls. Route keepers wandered through marked soil zones with the grave importance of tiny furry inspectors. Everlight was growing. Not pretending, not waiting, growing. Aurora stood at the forward viewport with her arms folded, watching the world rise to meet them. The last time they had left, they had gone to stop a war. Now they were returning with thousands of lives attached to their decisions. That part still felt impossible. Plum leaned sideways beside her, pressing her forehead to the glass. "I swear the city got bigger while we were gone." "It did," Ellie said from behind them, without looking up from her datapad. Plum turned. "That was meant to be dramatic. It was also accurate. You're not fun." "I'm correct. Those are enemies." Mira sat near the side window, quiet, not frozen this time. Not broken, just quiet. Her long blonde hair fell across one shoulder as she watched Everlight's landing fields come into view. Aurora glanced at her. "You all right?" Mira took a moment before answering. "Yes." Aurora waited. Mira gave a tiny smile. "That's the strange part." Plum softened immediately, which somehow made the whole shuttle feel warmer. Ellie finally looked up. Mira kept watching the world below. "I thought leaving Valacrest again would feel like losing something." Her voice stayed soft. But it didn't. Aurora moved closer. "What did it feel like?" Mira breathed in, like closing a door. A pause. Properly. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then Plum nodded. "Good." Mira glanced at her. "Good?" "Yeah." Plum leaned back against the window. "Doors are rude when they stay half open." Ellie blinked slowly. "That almost made sense." "I know. I'm worried too." Mira laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't huge. But it was real. Aurora smiled and looked back out at Everlight. The shuttle banked toward the main landing platform. Below, people had already gathered. Workers, settlers, children, officials. Aurora frowned. "Why are there so many people?" Ellie checked the landing schedule. "They were notified we were returning." Aurora's frown deepened. "Who notified them?" Mira looked down at her datapad. "Plum." Aurora turned slowly. Plum had already started edging away. Aurora narrowed her eyes. "What did you send?" Plum gave an innocent smile so guilty it practically had fingerprints on it. "Nothing dramatic." Ellie read aloud from the file. "Attention citizens of Everlight. Sparkle Doom returns victorious from punching a war in the face. Casual cheering encouraged. Snacks welcome." Aurora closed her eyes. Mira covered her mouth to stop laughing. Plum lifted one finger. "To be fair?" "No." "It worked." "No." The shuttle touched down. The ramp lowered. The sound hit them immediately. Cheers. Not wild, not imperial. Not the roaring hunger of Eclipse crowds. This was different. Warmer. Human. Families stood beside construction crews. Children waved little handmade banners. Someone had painted a route keeper wearing a crown on a sheet and held it above the crowd. A group of workers near the side had clearly taken Plum's snack requests seriously and were passing around trays of food. Aurora stepped onto the ramp. For one heartbeat, she almost stepped back. The attention still felt strange. The cheering, the expectation, the belief. Then Mira stepped beside her. Then Ellie. Then Plum. Together they walked down. Everlight welcomed them home. Kenny and Celine waited near Wuxi Square. Reach's flagship stood behind them, its black and silver hull gleaming beneath the afternoon sun. Aurora saw the ship and immediately slowed. Her father was leaving. She had known that. Of course she had known that. But seeing the flagship ready made it real. Kenny noticed her looking. He smiled faintly. You look like you're about to accuse me of escaping paperwork. Aurora folded her arms. Are you? Partly. I knew it. Celine stepped forward and hugged Aurora before the joke could continue. It was the kind of hug that lasted longer than expected. Aurora accepted it without complaint. Then Celine hugged Mira. Mira melted into it. Not dramatically, just naturally. That, more than anything, showed how much had changed. Celine pulled back and touched Mira's cheek. How are you feeling? Mira smiled, eyes bright. Like I need to sleep for a week. Good. That sounds honest. Can rulers do that? No. Mira sighed. I thought so. Celine handed her a slim black folder. Mira looked suspicious immediately. Please tell me that's not more paperwork. It is. Mira stared. Celine smiled. Diplomatic frameworks, housing transfer procedures, settlement integration models, refugee intake policies, also a few personal notes from me. Mira's expression softened. Personal notes? Things I wish someone had told me earlier. Mira hugged the folder to her chest. Thank you. Kenny looked at Ellie next. Security projections? Ellie straightened slightly. Already updated. Everlight's civil defense network can handle the first wave. Unity's infrastructure can support overflow if transport distribution is staggered across 12 days instead of 7. Kenny's eyes warmed with approval. Good. Ellie nodded once, trying very hard not to look pleased. Failing slightly. Then Kenny looked at Plum. Plum grinned. Before you say anything, I did not start another war. Kenny raised an eyebrow. Since breakfast? Plum considered. Yes. Excellent progress. Thank you. Kenny pointed at her. Do not let foreign captains distract you. Plum froze. Aurora slowly turned toward her. Ellie made a tiny sound that might have been a cough if she wasn't clearly enjoying herself. Plum's eyes widened. I don't know what you mean. Kenny smiled. I have intelligence officers. That's cheating. I founded a house. Still cheating. Aurora leaned closer. Foreign captains? Plum glared at Kenny. You are a dangerous old gossip. Kenny laughed. Celine gave Plum a fond look. Be careful. Plum softened. I will. Then added, mostly. Celine sighed. That's probably the best we'll get. Finally, Kenny faced Aurora. The mood changed. Not heavily, just honestly. He looked at her like a father first, a ruler second, and someone who knew exactly how heavy leadership could become. I'm going back to Prime Reach. Aurora nodded. To investigate. Yes. Kenny looked toward the sky. That rival house moved too confidently. They took risks they shouldn't have taken. They believed someone would support them. Ellie nodded. Backers. At least one. Kenny's expression cooled. Maybe more. Aurora glanced toward the city. So what happens now? You build. That answer was immediate. Aurora looked back at him. Kenny continued. You settle the people who chose you. They didn't choose me. They did. They chose Reach. They chose what Reach means. He paused. And whether you like it or not, you're part of that meaning now. Aurora didn't answer. Kenny stepped closer. You don't need to chase the next enemy before we understand them. His voice lowered. That's how rulers get dragged into wars other people designed. Aurora absorbed that. He was right. Annoyingly, as usual. Kenny smiled slightly, recognizing her expression. I'll find out who they are. And then? Then we'll plan. Aurora nodded. In a few weeks. In a few weeks. He gave her a pointed look. Call even if nothing is wrong. Aurora smiled. That's suspiciously parental. I am suspiciously your father. Plum leaned toward Ellie. That sounded rehearsed. Ellie whispered back. Definitely. Kenny ignored them. Mostly. Celine stepped beside him. If anything happens before then, you call us. Aurora nodded. We will. Celine looked at all four girls. I mean that. Her gaze settled on Mira. Anything. Mira nodded, holding the folder tighter. I know. Before boarding, Kenny paused. His eyes moved across Everlight, the half-built city, the families gathered in the square, the statue standing tall above them, the landing fields ready for thousands more. Then he looked back to Aurora. You've built something good here. Aurora swallowed. We're trying. That's what building is. Then he smiled. And Aurora? Yeah? Don't start a war while I'm gone. Plum immediately lifted both hands. Why does everyone keep looking at me? Kenny pointed at her. I wasn't. Aurora burst out laughing. Plum looked betrayed. That was somehow worse. Kenny boarded with Celine moments later. The flagship rose slowly. The crowd watched in reverent silence as the vessel climbed into the sky. Aurora kept her eyes on it until it became a silver mark against gold cloud. Then nothing. Mira stood beside her. Ellie on the other side. Plum behind them. For the first time in days, they weren't under Kenny's shadow. Not abandoned, not unsupported, but alone in the way leaders eventually had to be. Aurora breathed in, then turned toward Everlight. All right. Plum looked nervous. That's your planning voice. It is. Can we eat first? Aurora glanced at the gathered crowd, then at the trays of food. Yes. Plum pumped a fist. Leadership. The first week after Valicrest became a blur. Everlight did not simply receive people. It absorbed stories. Every transport brought lives that did not fit neatly into intake forms. A former schoolteacher arrived with 42 children whose parents were still relocating. A group of farmers from the Western Corridor brought seed vaults, soil samples, and 3 stubborn pack animals nobody had technically approved. A medical team arrived carrying their own surgical equipment because they refused to trust noble storage records after Valicrest Command had hidden supplies during the crisis. A theater troupe arrived. Nobody understood why. Plum immediately adopted them. Ellie immediately regretted that. Mira worked from dawn until long past midnight. She sorted housing requests, checked family groupings, matched skills to settlement needs, flagged trauma cases, reviewed supply intake, answered questions from people who still didn't understand whether they were guests, citizens, refugees, or something else entirely. By the 4th day, she had created a new category: chosen settlers. Aurora saw it on a report and smiled for 5 minutes. Mira pretended not to notice. Everyone noticed. Everlight changed under the weight of the arrivals. Temporary housing expanded across the eastern field. Unity accepted overflow families through scheduled shuttles. The food hall became a storm of accents, stories, and arguments over whose bread was better. Route keepers became immediate celebrities. Children from Valicrest followed them everywhere. Meatball, who had returned from an inspection of the northern fields with mud on his nose and the authority of a small emperor, spent an entire afternoon sitting in the middle of a new road site until engineers moved it. Again. Nobody questioned him. The city was loud now, not chaotic, alive. Aurora spent her mornings in meetings and her afternoons walking through the new districts. She listened to complaints, real ones, small ones, important ones. A family needed space for an elderly grandmother. A former Valicrest guard wanted to know whether his old rank meant anything here. A baker demanded proper ovens. A child asked if route keepers were allowed inside classrooms. Aurora answered what she could, delegated what she couldn't, pretended she knew what she was doing when necessary, which was often. On the 8th morning, Rowan found her standing in the middle of a half-built public garden with a datapad in one hand and a deeply offended expression. He stopped beside her. You look betrayed by landscaping. Aurora didn't look up. This path is wrong. Rowan glanced at the projected plan. No, it's curved. It's wrong. It's meant to curve. It curves stupidly. He smiled. That's not a technical term. It should be. Rowan took the datapad and studied it. His dark hair was tied back messily, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. The scar over his lip shifted as he frowned thoughtfully. Aurora watched him without meaning to. That was becoming a problem. A nice problem. An inconvenient nice problem. He pointed to the plan. The curve follows drainage. Aurora blinked. Oh. Very romantic, I know. She took the data pad back. I knew that. Absolutely. I was testing you. Obviously. They stood together for a moment, looking over the unfinished garden. Stone borders had been laid. Young trees waited in soil crates. Workers were installing irrigation lines. Children from the new arrivals had already begun playing in the dirt, because apparently waiting for completion was an adult sickness. Aurora watched them. Why gardens? Rowan looked at her. What? You said once every settlement should have public gardens. His expression softened. Yeah. Why? He leaned against a half-built stone wall. For once he didn't answer immediately. That made Aurora pay attention. My first home didn't have any. The words were simple. Aurora stayed quiet. Rowan continued. It was an industrial colony. Functional, efficient, ugly as a dead battery. Aurora smiled faintly. That sounds awful. It was. He looked toward the young trees. Everything was built around output. Transport routes, storage, processing, housing blocks, work shifts. A pause. Nobody thought beauty mattered. Aurora watched him. Then one of the old water systems failed. His voice stayed calm, but something underneath it shifted. Flooded half the lower district. Not enough green space. Not enough drainage. Not enough people in charge who cared what happened below the administrative levels. Aurora's expression softened. Rowan? He shook his head gently. I'm all right. She waited. He continued anyway. My little sister used to draw parks. Aurora's chest tightened. We never had one. She just invented them. He smiled, but it hurt. Big trees, blue ponds, ridiculous flowers, benches everywhere. A pause. After she died, I decided if I ever helped build settlements, I'd make sure kids had somewhere soft to land. Aurora looked at the garden again. It changed. It wasn't decoration. It wasn't vanity. It was memory turned into infrastructure. That's why public gardens. Rowan nodded. That's why public gardens? Aurora breathed in slowly. Then the path can curve. He looked amused. Generous. But not stupidly. Of course not. They laughed. It was quiet. Easy. A worker nearby glanced over and quickly looked away with the face of someone trying very hard not to look delighted by their ruler flirting beside irrigation pipes. Aurora noticed. Her cheeks warmed slightly. Rowan noticed that. He was smart enough not to mention it. Mostly. So? He said. Aurora narrowed her eyes. That tone. What tone? The dinner tone. He smiled. Is it working? Depends. On? Whether you brought food. Rowan lifted a wrapped bundle from behind the wall. Aurora stared. You planned this. I'm an engineer. That's not an answer. It's a warning. Inside the bundle were 2 simple meals from the food hall. Fresh bread. Roasted vegetables, spiced meat, 2 small pastries. Aurora looked at the pastries. Plum? Bribed her for access to the good shelf. With what? Agreement that the dessert annex should have independent governance. Aurora closed her eyes. You've created a monster. She was already there. Fair. They ate sitting on the unfinished garden wall. No ceremony. No guards close enough to hear. No expectations. Rowan talked about water lines. Aurora pretended to understand more than half. Aurora talked about council structures. Rowan pretended not to be impressed by how much she had learned. At one point, a route keeper waddled between them, inspected Rowan's boot, sneezed, then left. Rowan stared. Did I pass? Aurora shook her head gravely. No one knows. The afternoon stretched warmer. For a while, Aurora forgot to measure herself. She wasn't champion, wasn't ruler, wasn't daughter of Kenny Reach. wasn't the girl who had survived Kale. She was just sitting on a wall with someone who made her feel like breathing wasn't a task. That scared her, but not enough to run. Rowan noticed when she went quiet. "You all right?" Aurora looked at him. The old fear flickered, small, distant, still present. "Yeah. You sure?" She smiled. "Mostly." He nodded. Mostly is allowed. That helped more than he knew. Aurora looked back toward the garden. "I think I'd like another dinner sometime." Rowan blinked, then smiled. "You beat me to it." "Good. That's dangerous." "I know." He glanced at her. "Slow? Slow. No surprises?" "No surprises. No flying boots?" Aurora laughed. "Especially no flying boots." The laugh stayed with her all the way back to the administrative hall. The 10th day brought the largest convoy yet. It arrived just after sunrise. At first, Everlight Control thought the fleet signature was a system error. Too many ships, too many civilian codes, too many independent transponders overlapping each other like a flock of metal birds. Then the sky above the eastern landing fields darkened. Transports broke through cloud cover in lines stretching to the horizon. Not dozens, hundreds. Cargo carriers, passenger barges, family shuttles, old Veilcrest civilian ferries held together by desperate engineering and hope. Unity flagged matching arrivals minutes later. The people had come, not a wave, a migration. Everlight's emergency bell sounded, not danger, arrival. Aurora reached the observation platform at a run. Mira was already there. Her face had gone pale. Plum arrived barefoot, holding one boot. Ellie arrived fully dressed, because Ellie apparently slept in a state of tactical readiness. Rowan came up behind Aurora, breathing hard. Below them, the first transports began landing. Doors opened. People spilled into sunlight. So many people. Families holding hands. Elderly couples. Workers with tool belts. Doctors carrying medical cases. Teachers carrying classroom boxes. Children clutching toys. Former soldiers without weapons. Servants still wearing plain palace work clothes. Gardeners. Cooks. Laundry women. Stable hands. Clerks. Musicians. Engineers. Thousands. Then tens of thousands. Mira's hand rose to her mouth. Aurora stepped beside her. "They really came," Mira whispered. "I didn't think." Her voice failed. The first group crossed the landing field. At their head walked a man in old military dress. Not ornate, not noble. Practical grey-black uniform with Veilcrest insignia removed from the shoulders. He was older, perhaps 60, with a scar across his scalp, and a back that had once been straight enough to frighten recruits. Behind him walked hundreds of former Veilcrest soldiers. No weapons, hands visible. Then the man stopped before Aurora and Mira. He looked first at Aurora, then at Mira. His eyes softened. "Lady Mira," Mira swallowed. "General?" The old soldier smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Mira stared. "General Harlan Vey." Aurora glanced at her. Mira whispered, "He commanded the Eastern Defense when I was little." Harlan bowed. "I did." His gaze remained on Mira. "And I failed you." Mira shook her head. "No. Yes." The old soldier's voice carried without effort. Every person nearby fell silent. "I served House Veilcrest for 41 years. A pause. I told myself loyalty meant patience. Another. I told myself change would come if the right heir survived long enough to inherit. Mira's eyes filled. Harlan continued. "We watched you grow. We watched you endure. We watched you show mercy in a house that punished it." He looked briefly toward the masses behind him. "Many of us believed you would one day become the ruler Veilcrest needed." Mira trembled. Harlan lowered himself to one knee. The sound that passed through the crowd was enormous. Former soldiers knelt behind him, then servants, then teachers, then workers, a field of people bowing not to blood, to what they had hoped blood might become. Mira began crying. Harlan bowed his head. "When you were cast out, many of us lost hope." He looked up. When you returned as Mira Reach, we understood. A pause. We had been waiting for a ruler. Another. What we needed was a home. Aurora's throat tightened. Mira couldn't speak. Harlan turned to Aurora. Champion Reach. Aurora straightened. We request settlement. The field held its breath. Not asylum. His voice remained strong. Not charity. We bring builders. Doctors. Defense officers. Teachers. Engineers. Farmers. People ready to work. He looked toward Everlight's rising skyline. Give us soil, and we will grow food. Give us stone, and we will build homes. Give us law, and we will uphold it. Give us a future, and we will earn it. Aurora looked across the field, at the people kneeling, at the ship still landing, at Mira crying beside her. This was the part nobody told you about victory. Sometimes people didn't cheer. They arrived with everything they owned and asked if your promise had been real. Aurora stepped forward. You don't need to kneel. Harlan didn't move. Aurora's voice strengthened. Any of you. Slowly, Harlan stood. The others followed. Aurora looked at the crowd. You were told your worth belonged to houses. Silence. You were told loyalty meant staying quiet while people above you made choices that hurt you. Her gaze moved across faces. You were told survival meant obedience. A child clung to her mother's coat. Aurora saw her. And then you chose differently. The crowd remained still. Aurora smiled. Everlight accepts you. A sound moved through them. Not cheering yet. Too much emotion for cheering. Aurora continued. Unity accepts you. Now the sound broke. People cried openly. Some hugged. Some collapsed into relief. Mira stepped forward then. Harlan turned to her. Mira's voice shook but carried. I can't be what you once hoped I would be. Harlan listened. I won't rule Valacrest. I won't take that name back. And I won't rebuild the house that hurt us. She looked at the people. But if you want to build something new, her voice strengthened. I'll help. That was when the cheering began. Not massive, not polished, raw. Thousands of people releasing fear in one breath. Plum wiped her eyes. Ellie looked away and pretended to check a report. Rowan stood behind Aurora, watching her like he was seeing a new piece of her settle into place. Aurora didn't notice. She was too busy realizing Everlight had become bigger than her plans. It was no longer a settlement. It was a promise people were willing to cross stars to reach. The next days became controlled chaos. Everlight's population surged almost overnight. Temporary districts expanded across the eastern plains. Unity received 3 transport waves carrying agricultural families, teachers, environmental workers, and several thousand children. Mira reorganized the intake system twice. Then a third time because Plum accidentally created a snack-based queue that somehow worked better than the official version. Ellie took over defensive screening with Harlan's help. At first, she didn't trust him. That lasted until he corrected one of her patrol projections and turned out to be right. She stared at him for 4 full seconds. Then said, You may continue. Harlan looked amused. Thank you, Minister Dawnfall. Ellie froze. Plum appeared from nowhere. Minister Dawnfall? No. It's back. Absolutely not. Harlan quickly learned Sparkle Doom had its own internal weather patterns. Mira spent one afternoon with Tessa and the former palace servants who had relocated. They entered Everlight's main food hall cautiously, unsure where they belonged. By evening, they had reorganized half the kitchen, improved meal distribution, and made Plum cry with a honey biscuit recipe from Mira's childhood. Plum tried to deny the crying. Nobody believed her. Aurora moved constantly. Meetings, speeches, housing inspections, food supply checks, garden walks, disputes, questions, small emergencies. A child lost a toy. A family couldn't find their assigned shelter. A former Valacrest officer panicked because he had never lived without rank. An old woman refused to sleep indoors because the stars on Everlight looked like the ones from her childhood valley. Aurora handled what she could, listened when she couldn't, learned the difference. By the end of the fourth night, she fell asleep at her desk. Rowan found her there. He did not wake her. He simply placed a blanket over her shoulders and quietly left a note beside her hand. You are allowed to rest before becoming legendary again tomorrow. Aurora found it in the morning. She smiled for far too long. Plum saw. Plum gasped. Aurora immediately hid the note. Too late. What is that? Nothing. That was a romantic nothing. It was a municipal nothing. Did Rowan municipal you? Aurora stood. I'm leaving. Plum chased her down the hall. Did he infrastructure your heart? Plum. Answer the question. Ellie heard the commotion from the council room. She did not ask. She valued peace. 2 weeks after the first convoy, Everlight held its first official welcome gathering. Not a ceremony. Aurora refused that word. A gathering. The new arrivals filled Wuxi Square and spilled into surrounding streets. Food stalls lined the roads. Music from Valcrest mixed with Everlight instruments. Route keepers wandered between tables stealing vegetable scraps. Children from Unity played with children from Valcrest as though their worlds had never been separate. At the edge of the square, Harlan stood beside Mira. He watched people laugh beneath the statue and looked almost confused by it. Mira noticed. What? He shook his head. I spent most of my life preparing for collapse. A pause. I forgot people could sound like this. Mira smiled sadly. So did I. Harlan looked at her. You wear reach well. Mira looked down at her black and silver jacket. I used to think I had to wear a name until it fit. And now? She looked across the square. At Aurora arguing with a group of builders. At Plum teaching children a chant that Ellie would absolutely ban later. At Rowan helping repair a food stall light without being asked. Now I think names are built? Harlan nodded. Then you've built yours well? Mira's eyes softened. Thank you. Across the square, Rowan found Aurora near the garden steps. She looked tired, happy, overwhelmed. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with the fact she kept choosing to stand in the middle of impossible things. He handed her a cup. She took it suspiciously. What is it? Tea? Normal tea? Mostly. Rowan. Plum helped. Aurora lowered the cup. Absolutely not. He laughed. Relax. I stopped her adding glitter. That sentence didn't help. They stood side by side watching the gathering. For once, nobody interrupted them immediately. Aurora looked across the square. Did you ever think it would become this? Rowan followed her gaze. No. Honest. I thought I'd build water systems and argue about pipe placement. You still do that. True, he smiled. But this? He gestured toward the people. This feels bigger than engineering. Aurora sipped the tea carefully. It was safe, barely. Everything feels bigger than it used to. Rowan looked at her. Does that scare you? Aurora considered lying, then didn't. Yes, he nodded. Good. She looked at him. Did my dad tell you to say that? No. It sounded like him. I'll apologize to myself later. Aurora laughed. Rowan smiled softly. For what it's worth? She glanced over. I think scared people who keep showing up make better leaders than fearless people who never had to care. Aurora held his gaze. The crowd noise softened around them. For a second it felt like the whole world had stepped back. Then Plum shouted from across the square. Aurora, tell Ellie my chant is culturally important. Ellie's voice followed. It is a public safety issue. Aurora closed her eyes. Rowan smiled. Your kingdom calls. Unfortunately. Second dinner later, Aurora looked at him. Her answer came easier this time. Yes. His smile widened. Slow? Slow? No surprises? She looked toward Plum, who was now standing on a table. No promises from the universe. Fair. Far away on Prime Reach, Kenny descended beneath the capital alone. The intelligence archive was not listed on any public map. Most people believed House Reach's information network operated from the Central Palace. That was cute. Wrong, but cute. The real archive sat beneath the oldest part of Prime Reach's capital, below defense bunkers, below historic vaults, below the sealed chamber where Kenny kept records from the 10th eclipse no historian would ever be allowed to dramatize. The elevator sank for nearly 2 minutes. When the doors opened, cold blue light greeted him. Rows of black data columns stretched into the distance. Silent, windowless. Protected by systems designed by people who trusted nobody, including themselves. An elderly woman waited at the entrance. Director Miley Voss. No relation to Darius, though she had once joked that if one more person asked, she would change her name out of spite. She had served Reach intelligence for 27 years. She knew where more bodies were buried than most graveyards. Kenny trusted her completely, which meant he still only trusted her with half of everything. Lord Reach. Mael. She looked him over. You look tired. So do you. I'm 92. Excuses. Her mouth twitched. Then the humor faded. You asked for identification on the rival house's support network. I did. We have it. Kenny's expression shifted. Mael turned and began walking. Kenny followed. They passed through 3 security doors, a biometric lock, a voice seal, a memory phrase only 3 living people knew. At the final chamber, Mael stopped. You should know something first. Kenny didn't like that. What? The rival house didn't move alone. I assumed that. No. She looked back at him. I mean, they may not have even been the true actor. Kenny went very still. Maela opened the chamber. Inside, a single black folder waited on a lit table. No digital display. No floating hologram. Paper. That alone told Kenny enough to concern him. Paper meant isolation. No network trace. No remote breach. No accidental exposure. Kenny stepped forward. The folder bore no title. Only one symbol. A white crown broken through the center by a vertical red line. Kenny stopped. For 1 second, he did not breathe. Mael watched him carefully. You recognize it? Kenny reached for the folder slowly. I hoped I wouldn't. He opened it. The first page contained confirmed financial routes, weapons shipments, political intermediaries, communication intercepts, mercenary contracts, old noble correspondence. Then the name. Kenny stared at it. The archive seemed colder. Maela waited. Kenny turned the page, then another. Every line made the situation worse. After several minutes, he closed the folder. Quietly. Too quietly. Maela finally spoke. Lord Reach? Kenny kept his hand resting on the folder. For a long moment, he looked older. Not weak. Never weak. But the past had weight, and sometimes even legends had to carry it. He whispered, No. Maela said nothing. Kenny looked down at the broken crown symbol. He hadn't seen it in over 20 years. He had hoped he never would again. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, controlled. Dangerous. This just became a lot bigger than Valacrest. Mael nodded slowly. What are your orders? Kenny opened the folder again. His eyes hardened. Lock the archive. A pause. Wake the old network. Mael's expression changed. You haven't used that since the rain collapse. I know. Are you certain? Kenny looked at the symbol again. Beyond Prime Reach, across quiet stars, Aurora was building homes. Mira was finding peace. Plum was discovering trouble with green eyes. Ellie was holding impossible systems together through sheer will. Everlight and Unity were opening their doors. And somewhere in the dark, an old enemy had started moving pieces across the board. Kenny closed the folder. Yes. Mila bowed her head once. It will be done. Kenny turned toward the archive exit. For the first time since the eclipse ended, his hand drifted toward the place where his telekinetic daggers used to hover. They were not there anymore. He had given them away. That made him smile slightly. A strange smile. A proud one. Then it disappeared. He walked into the blue-lit corridor, coat trailing behind him. Behind him, the black archive doors sealed. Ahead of him, Prime Reach began waking old secrets. And far away on Everlight, Aurora Reach laughed beneath lantern light, unaware that the next war had already found her family. Not through Valacrest, not through refugees, not through politics, through history. The kind that never stayed buried, the kind that waited, the kind that remembered names.